It starts with something small. A misstep on the back porch, a pause at the grocery store curb. Maybe a moment where standing up from your favorite recliner takes longer than it used to. For many seniors across the United States, these are brushed off as normal aging. Until one day, they're not. Until walking becomes task. Until stairs feel impossible. Until strength slips away without permission. After 70, every step you take is a symbol of your independence. It's not just about getting from point to B. It's about being able to live, move, and exist without fear. What many don't realize is that by the time these signs appear, muscle loss has already been working silently for years. It doesn't announce itself. It just takes. Until you can't get up without help. In today's episode of Elderly Reflections, we'll travel through real stories of older Americans who caught these early signs, fought back with wisdom, and rebuilt the strength that age tried to steal. These aren't just stories. They're motivation, inspiration, and life lessons from the elderly worth holding onto. And before we dive in, don't forget to hit subscribe and turn on the bell. Stay connected with new videos full of senior health tips, quotes, and elderly wisdom. Delivered right when you need them most. When we think about getting older in America, we picture family dinners, quiet mornings on the porch, anniversaries marked with laughter and tears. But sometimes, in the middle of all that warmth, something quietly shifts. Maybe it's reaching for the sugar jar and needing both hands. Maybe simple activity like walking down the hall suddenly leaves you pausing halfway, catching your breath. For Joseph, retired school principal in Ohio, it was the first time he hesitated, reaching for his grandchild to lift her into his arms. I felt the weight, he admitted. Not just hers, but the weight of my own body telling me, slow down. That moment didn't scare him. It surprised him, and that surprise was the beginning of discovery. Every step after 70 really does depend on muscle strength. Not just big muscles, but the everyday kind. Does that let you rise from chair, carry groceries from the car, or stand a little taller when you see someone you love? Losing them doesn't feel immediate, and you don't necessarily notice until something as simple as walking becomes effort. Let's begin with something subtle, something so quiet it often goes unnoticed. The way your favorite clothes begin to fit differently. It starts without much fanfare. Maybe your favorite pair of jeans slides down, or that sweater looks baggier than usual. You shrug and think, maybe the tailor accidentally let it out. That's exactly what happened to Helen, 75, in suburban Texas. Long retired, she spent mornings gardening roses and afternoons siding up the fence with her husband. One day she reached for her shawl and noticed it sagged from her shoulders. She didn't consider diet or illness. Instead, she joked must have been that sweater's way of going out of style. Yet when she stepped on the scale, the number hadn't changed. No intentional weight loss, just clothes shifting. Soon she felt colder too. Wearing jackets indoors in spring didn't seem right, but it became normal. Her teenage grandson once teased her, "Granny, don't freeze." But what he said meant more than temperature. It hinted at something deeper. Core strength slipping away. Researchers call this sarcopenia. Age-related muscle loss linked to lower strength, slower metabolism, and higher risk of falls or fractures. Contrary to popular belief, it's not inevitable if you take early action. According to new findings, seniors can lose 3–5% of muscular mass per decade starting after 60, with acceleration after 70. But strength training and sufficient protein can reverse or slow that loss. Helen was astonished when community nurse in San Antonio explained that her muscles were shrinking, not her clothes. That insight resonated deeply. Though she felt youthful, her body silently disagreed. She felt weaker on stairs, needed help moving small table, and occasionally needed breaks during lunch prep. One day, she leaned over to trim rose stem and suddenly felt stiff. Arms shaken, she whispered, "This feels wrong. I've been doing this for years." That statement was her turning point. Helen's story echoes, quote, "We share for motivation on Elderly Reflections. Strength is not just what you carry, it's what you refuse to lose." She didn't want to lose her morning routines, her sense of independence, or that spark that lights up when she's working in her rose garden. So she started gardening. And gardening with purpose. Every week she lifted light stones, carried soil, and stretched across flower beds. And when she fell asleep that night, she felt something she hadn't in a while. Strong arms. The next sign shows up not in what you wear, but in how long you can stay present. For some seniors, it's the exhaustion that sweeps in after the smallest task. Dinner used to be sociable. Bob, 78, in Michigan, hosted weekly meals where kids came home, neighbors showed up, and laughter filled the kitchen. But within months, after scooping mashed potatoes onto his plate, he'd feel heat rush in. heart pounding, breath shallow, until he'd excuse himself and nap in his recliner. His family thought it was holiday stress or maybe his blood pressure acting up, but Bob knew it felt different. One night, as his wife asked if he wanted help clearing dishes, he paused, took deep breath, and said, "I can't, not tonight." He didn't realize his muscle strength, and by extension his metabolic system, was faltering. When muscle tissue declines, your body demands more effort to power basic activities. Even sitting upright can become effortful. Fatigue doesn't always mean sleep deprivation. It means muscle depletion. According to senior health research from Tufts University, adults over 70 need more protein per pound of body weight to maintain muscle. But appetite often declines with age, and protein intake suffers. At routine checkup, Bob's doctor mentioned muscle inefficiency and encouraged resistance training with gentle exercises. Strong but simple ones like chair stands, wall push-ups, and light dumbbells. Bob felt relief. He began with one 10-minute session weekly. And two. Soon he found himself in his garden again carrying that same basket of vegetables, but smiling instead of sighing. He realized that with muscle came energy. Not just physical, but mental and emotional. He felt more engaged in conversation. He remembered details better. He rediscovered how sweet looking over the patio flowers felt on his chest when he no longer wanted to sleep right after dinner. Bob began sharing quote he loved during his weekly retiree meetup. Every muscle is a small engine. Keep fueling them, and life stays in motion. He became quiet inspiration to others, like many stories across elderly reflections. There's something almost invisible about losing your balance. It doesn't arrive with loud thud or dramatic fall. Not at first. It begins quietly. Moment of hesitation before stepping off the porch. Subtle sway when standing still, and reaching for the counter that didn't used to need support. That was how it started for Carol, 74-year-old retired librarian from Grand Rapids, Michigan. For most of her life, Carol walked briskly to the neighborhood market every Saturday morning, then returned with tote full of fresh apples and cheese, chatting with shopkeepers along the way. But one autumn morning, she found herself stopping more often, looking down at her feet, unsure why she suddenly felt unsure. "I was still me," she said, "but I didn't trust my own legs." She brushed it off, blaming stiff joints or the weather. But deep down, something had changed. Her stride shortened. Her knees felt softer. She started walking closer to fences or buildings, just in case. The balance she'd always taken for granted had begun to fray. That same week, she tripped over a raised crack in the sidewalk, one she had stepped over countless times before, and barely caught herself on parked car. Her heart pounded not from the stumble, but from the shock. There wasn't the fall, she said. There was realizing how close I was to going down. Carol's experience is more common than many realize. According to the CDC, over 1 in 4 Americans aged 65 and older falls each year, and the majority of those falls are linked to muscle loss in the legs and core. What's striking is how early the signs can appear, and how easily they're dismissed as just aging. Yet studies in the Journal of Aging Research have shown that the earliest indicators, like decreased walking speed, poor posture, and hesitance on uneven ground, are directly tied to weakening in the stabilizing muscle groups, the quadriceps, glutes, calves, and small core muscles. These aren't the glamorous muscles. You don't flex them in mirrors, but they hold you up every single day. The issue isn't just mechanical. It's emotional. After her near fall, Carol stopped going to the Saturday market. She began sending her niece instead. She canceled planned trip to Chicago with friends. "I told them I was tired," she said, "but the truth is I was scared. I didn't want to fall in public. I didn't want to be seen as weak." What balance stole from her wasn't just physical ability. It was confidence, spontaneity, and connection. This is the silent spiral of instability. It's not just that walking becomes harder. It's that life becomes smaller, and then there's reaction time. If balance is the silent thief, reaction time is the one we often don't notice until something falls, and we don't catch it. Frank, 77-year-old retired mechanic from rural Ohio, learned this the hard way. He was reaching for a jar on the top shelf when it slipped. In his younger years, his hands would have caught it midair. But this time, he simply stared as it shattered. "It was like my arms didn't get the message," he said. That moment haunted him. Not because of the mess, but because of the realization. He couldn't trust his reflexes anymore. Reaction time is more than a party trick. It's a vital protective mechanism, especially for seniors. The ability to stabilize yourself when tripping, to grab a railing, to move your hand away from something hot. All of it depends on the speed of your neuromuscular system, and like muscles, that system slows with age, especially when muscle tone declines. The Mayo Clinic warns that slowed reactions in older adults significantly increase the risk of injury. But it's not just physical. The emotional impact is real. After the jar incident, Frank became hyper-aware. He avoided carrying too many items at once. He stopped driving at night. He told his neighbor, "I don't like surprises anymore." This hesitation, this fear of the unexpected, began to color every part of his day. His daughter asked him to help babysit his grandson, and he declined. Not because he didn't want to, but because he was afraid he wouldn't react fast enough if something happened. That broke me. Little, he admitted, not being sure I could protect someone I loved. Both Carol and Frank were facing different symptoms of the same deeper issue. Gradual loss of muscular responsiveness, strength, and trust in their own bodies. And they're not alone. Across communities from Arizona to Pennsylvania, seniors are encountering these shifts. Some catching them early, others after fall or scare. But the key, as shared in so many stories from elderly reflections, recognition. The body speaks before it shouts. The balance checks, the jars drop, the slower steps. They're not failures, they're messages, and just like any message, they can lead to change. Carol, after confiding in her doctor and watching a video from a local physical therapist, began practicing simple standing exercises at home. Lifting one foot for 10 seconds while brushing her teeth, practicing sit-to-stand movements from dining chair, holding broomstick behind her back to improve posture. Within weeks, she noticed she no longer reached for the walls when walking to the kitchen. "My legs remembered," she said, smiling. "They just needed reminding." Frank started using reaction ball. Small rubber ball that bounced unpredictably when dropped. To retrain his reflexes. At first, it was frustrating, but with practice, his hands responded faster. He also began playing simple tossing games with his grandson, regaining trust in his body one motion at a time. "I felt silly at first," he admitted, "but then I realized I'm rebuilding the part of me that I thought was gone." Balance and reaction. Two things we assume will stay with us until one day they don't. In the wisdom of the elderly, there is a powerful reminder. What fades can return if we're willing to act, and often the smallest changes. 10 minutes day, few exercises, shift in awareness, can open the door back to confidence, movement, and dignity. In next chapter, we'll dive deeper into how Carol and Frank, and others like them, rebuilt their strength not through gyms or programs, but through habit, mindset, nutrition, and self-belief. Because this journey isn't about perfection. It's about persistence. It's not about doing what you once did. It's about reclaiming what you still can. Elderly wisdom isn't just about remembering. It's about choosing what comes next. Their journey revealed a rhythm, not a checklist. 5 practices woven into daily life that restored balance, reflexes, nourishment, mindset, and connection after 70. First, there was balance retraining. Each morning, Carol stood barefoot by her bathroom sink, one foot lifted, balancing while brushing her teeth. It wasn't glamorous, but it woke her ankles and hips. Afterward, she rose slowly from her chair without gripping the arms, focusing on soft control. 10 times. Midday, she carried broomstick behind her shoulders and walked down the hallway. Head aligned, shoulders open. Learning to stand tall again. Study in Journal of Aging research confirms that even such gentle balance moves her trained stabilizer muscles and lower fall risks by nearly a third. Frank's focus was rebuilding his reaction speed. With colorful reaction. Ball at his coffee table. He dropped it softly as tracking its bounce. First reflex catching it, then full retrieval. He turned it into shared ritual, joking with his grandson, not fast, but getting there. He also played toss games in the kitchen. Small actions that reconnected his reflexes to his brain. Research from the Mayo Clinic shows that neuromuscular exercises like these measurably improve protective responses in older adults. Nutrition became their invisible ally. Carol added boiled egg or Greek yogurt to her breakfast. Frank kept cottage cheese and walnuts by his armchair. Both sipped water regularly, knowing while dehydration impairs muscle capacity. Clinical nutrition guidelines recommend 1.0–1.3 grams of protein per kg of body weight daily for older adults to prevent sarcopenia. And these foods help them hit that goal. Hydration guideline also stress that in seniors, drinking before feeling thirsty keeps muscles responsive. Mindset tied it all together. Each evening, Carol praised her body. Walked 2 blocks without grabbing the railing. Frank whispered gratitude to his weakened legs. Thank you for climbing the stairs. These small mental loops. Notice, celebrate, repeat. Align with the J-curve emotional arc. Tiny setbacks followed by visible leaps of progress. According to modern behavioral science, such reframing drives sustained change more than guilt or pressure. Finally, there was connection. Walking. With her group of power walkers, Carol swapped stories of shaky knees and proud breakthroughs. Your smile gets lighter every week, someone once told her. Frank's grandson high-fived him after every catch. Those moments anchored their efforts and shared experience. Human-driven inspiration that's more powerful than any magazine article. They weren't chasing youth. They were reclaiming presence. Within weeks, Carol returned to the market, arms free, steps sure. Frank helped his grandson on the baseball field, quick to throw, ready to catch. They had reversed decline. Not through extremes, but by leaning into steady, daily practice rooted in elderly wisdom. This isn't story perfection. It's story persistence. Scholars have shown that combined balance and functional exercise cuts fall risk by roughly 24% among community-dwelling seniors. Protein plus resistance exercise elevates muscle mass and strength more than either alone. Reaction drills and posture work revitalize neuromuscular response and confidence. Their successes underscore the deepest life lessons from the elderly. Momentum grows not from dramatic leaps, but daily whispers of belief and action. Imagine starting as Carol and Frank did. Toothbrushing, balance practice, a reaction ball toss with a grandchild, 1 protein-rich meal, regular sips of water, a moment of gratitude, and the company of another. These are small loops with massive returns. Because after 70, every next step depends not on age, but on intention. Muscles fueled, reflexes remembered, hearts lifted, connections renewed. And with consistency, you'll find yourself moving not just once, but every day with more surety, curiosity, and dignity. So, if you've been feeling slower, if stairs seem steeper or your hands less certain, you're not alone. And more importantly, you're not stuck. What Carol and Frank discovered wasn't miracle. It was momentum. They listened to their bodies and responded. Not with fear, but with focus. And that changed everything. Maybe your journey begins with just one step, one stretch, one breath of belief. Maybe it begins today. Because after 70, strength is no longer about lifting the heaviest weight. It's about lifting yourself. In a new day of fresh hope, life still full of motion and meaning. And sometimes, that begins with simply saying, I'm not done yet. If this reflection spoke to you, we'd love to hear your voice. Where are you watching from? One moment in today's video felt personal to your journey. Please like this video. If it helped you in any way, subscribe for more real-life stories and senior health insights, and turn on notifications so you never miss a dose of elderly wisdom, inspiration, and the quiet motivation that moves lives forward. One step at a time.